Welcome to the most notorious prison in America, where corruption runs deeper than the Mississippi River. Inside the walls of Angola State Prison, power, crime, and survival collide in ways you wouldn't believe. Before we step inside, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this is one journey into the heart of darkness you cannot miss. Angola State Prison sits on more than 18,000 acres of land in the heart of Louisiana. The sprawling complex, originally a plantation, carries the weight of centuries, decades of slavery, chains, and blood-soaked soil. Today, it houses over 5,000 inmates, many serving life sentences without parole. But what makes Angola infamous isn't just its size, it's the stories of corruption, brutality, and human cruelty that thrive within its walls, far beyond the reach of public scrutiny. Walking through the gates, one immediately senses the tension that hangs thick in the air. Guards patrol the perimeter with an iron fist, while inside, a rigid hierarchy governs the daily lives of inmates. But behind the uniforms and locked doors, corruption has festered for decades, infiltrating every layer of the system. From officers turning a blind eye to smuggling contraband to the unchecked power of gang leaders, the prison operates like a state within a state, lawless, violent, and deadly. Inmates describe Angola as a place where survival is an art form. Loyalty and fear dictate behavior, alliances are fragile, and betrayal is often met with lethal consequences. Some inmates have spent decades inside these walls, witnessing killings, assaults, and abuse that never make headlines. But the most shocking aspect isn't just the violence, it's how it is often sanctioned or ignored by those meant to uphold the law. The prison's history only deepens the sense of dread. Originally a plantation, it became a penitentiary after the Civil War. Many of the same dynamics of control, oppression, and exploitation persisted. Angola was once notorious for forced labor, and even today, inmates work the fields under grueling conditions. Those who resist, or fail to comply, face punishment that often skirts the line between legal and illegal, sanctioned by those in power. Corruption in Angola isn't always overt. Sometimes, it's subtle, a contraband cell phone smuggled past security, a bribe paid for better treatment, or a guard who selectively enforces the rules. But make no mistake, when corruption touches Angola, it isn't just minor, it's systemic, pervasive, and deadly. Investigations have revealed that officers have allowed fights to escalate, turned blind eyes to assaults, and in some cases, directly participated in criminal activity themselves. Perhaps most disturbing are the stories told by the inmates themselves. From unsolved murders to coerced labor, every corner of Angola has a story steeped in fear and secrecy. Names are whispered in the cell blocks, men who rose to power through violence, officers who traded justice for profit, and survivors who learned to navigate the system just to see another day. But amidst this darkness, there are those who try to hold on to humanity. Inmates who mentor younger prisoners, guards who strive to do their job with integrity, and journalists who risk everything to document the truth. Their stories provide a glimmer of hope, but it is hope shadowed by the omnipresent threat of danger. As the gates close behind you, the air grows heavier. Every sound, the clang of metal doors, the distant shout, the whisper of rumors, feels amplified. You begin to understand that Angola isn't just a prison. It's a world unto itself, a microcosm where the worst of humanity thrives, and the lines between right and wrong blur into survival, corruption, and control. This is Angola, the most corrupt prison in Louisiana. And what you're about to see will challenge everything you think you know about life behind bars. If you're ready to dive deeper into the secrets of Angola and uncover stories the media won't touch, smash that subscribe button now and hit the bell icon to never miss an episode. Inside Angola, power isn't given, it's taken, seized with violence, intimidation, or cunning manipulation. Inmates live under a hierarchy that rivals organized crime families on the outside. At the top sit the kings, prisoners who command respect and fear across the entire complex. They control the flow of contraband, dictate cellblock rules, and even influence guard behavior. Their power doesn't come from brute strength alone, though that certainly plays a role, but from strategy, alliances, and an unspoken code that no one dares to challenge openly. Below the kings are the lieutenants, men responsible for enforcing rules and carrying out punishments. They are often the most dangerous players in the prison ecosystem because they wield authority and can manipulate both inmates and officers. A misstep here can cost a life, a freedom, or at the very least, a measure of safety. In Angola, a single whisper, a false accusation, or a broken alliance can ignite chaos in a matter of hours. The king's power is bolstered by fear, yet fear alone is not enough. Many of these men have spent decades inside, learning the nuances of manipulation, survival, and psychological control. They know who can be trusted, who will bend under pressure, and which guards can be bribed, or intimidated, to turn a blind eye. Rumors circulate about officers colluding with inmates, allowing certain prisoners to hold sway far beyond their cell blocks. Stories abound of contraband phones, weapons, and even drugs moving through the prison with impunity, all under the watchful eye of those entrusted to maintain order. Gang affiliations form the backbone of Angola's underground structure. Crips, Bloods, and local Louisiana gangs carve up territories, enforce codes, and exact revenge with surgical precision. These groups often dictate life in the yard and in the cell blocks, enforcing a brutal form of justice outside the law. An unspoken rule exists: break the code, and the consequences are swift and merciless. Many inmates carry tattoos that are far more than decoration. They are badges of allegiance, warnings, and threats all at once. Each mark tells a story, a ledger of loyalty, violence, and betrayal. Even the so-called neutral inmates are rarely safe. Many try to fly under the radar, keeping to themselves and avoiding gang affiliations. But in Angola, neutrality can be mistaken for weakness. The kings and lieutenants see it as a void to be exploited, a pawn to be moved, coerced, or destroyed. Survival often demands compromise, alliances with the morally ambiguous, or doing what outsiders would call the unthinkable. Amid this hierarchy, corruption seeps into every crevice. Officers, some overwhelmed, some complicit, often turn a blind eye to what happens behind closed doors. In certain documented cases, guards have supplied contraband in exchange for favors or simply looked the other way during violent altercations. Inmates report that officers sometimes encourage fights between rival factions to keep control through chaos. The line between law enforcer and criminal becomes almost non-existent inside these walls. Stories of brutality are common, but some rise above the ordinary. One inmate, known only by his nickname Big Mike, survived multiple attempts on his life while in solitary for years. Each attack was not random, it was orchestrated by a rival lieutenant trying to assert dominance over a portion of the yard. Mike's survival required a delicate balance of intimidation, manipulation, and cunning, exploiting rivalries among the gangs and understanding the psychology of the guards who controlled his fate. By the time he emerged from solitary, he wasn't just a survivor, he was a player in the larger game, a man who understood the intricate mechanics of Angola's social order better than most. Even in moments of extreme violence, there are codes and boundaries. Certain acts, like attacking someone under medical care or a new recruit who hasn't yet learned the rules, are taboo. But these rules are fluid, bending with the whims of the powerful, and often enforced only when convenient. What remains constant is that Angola is a place where every choice, every alliance, and every betrayal carries immense consequences. Families on the outside are a lifeline for some, but even this connection can become a weapon. Letters are intercepted, phone calls monitored, and visitors scrutinized. Kings use external influence as leverage, threatening inmates' families to maintain obedience or extract favors. Guards sometimes participate, adding another layer of control. Every interaction, every transaction is measured, calculated, and weighted with potential risk. By the time an inmate understands Angola's hierarchy, the line between predator and prey has blurred. The prison transforms ordinary men into strategists, manipulators, and survivors. It becomes a chessboard where every move is scrutinized, and the cost of a mistake is often paid in blood. Yet despite the pervasive fear and corruption, Angola is home to stories of resilience, ingenuity, and the human will to endure. Inmates find ways to maintain dignity, form bonds, and survive the unrelenting storm of power struggles that define this institution. As the sun sets over the sprawling fields of the prison, shadows stretch across the yard. The kings make their rounds, lieutenants enforce their authority, and the game continues. Each day is a negotiation, a battle, a survival test, one that repeats endlessly behind these infamous walls. Angola is more than a prison. It is a living organism, a world where corruption and power are the air inmates breathe, and where every soul must adapt, or be consumed. Angola's corruption doesn't stop at the gates, it seeps into the very system that is supposed to contain it. Behind the uniformed facade of law enforcement, a dark undercurrent flows, one of complicity, bribery, and selective enforcement. Here, the lines between predator and protector blur. Officers who should uphold justice often find themselves entangled in the prison's shadow economy, whether through fear, greed, or coercion. Contraband is the lifeblood of Angola's underground. Cigarettes, drugs, cell phones, and even homemade weapons circulate in ways that baffle outsiders. Some items are smuggled in by visitors, others by staff members willing to turn a blind eye, or actively participate. Investigations over the years have documented guards pocketing cash in exchange for a single phone slipping past security, or orchestrating fights that escalate in severity so they can intervene heroically and gain favor with the administration. The corruption is systemic, organized, and chillingly methodical. Inmates recount stories of officers who knowingly allowed rival gangs to clash, knowing the violence would consolidate power for certain trusted prisoners. In some cases, entire cell blocks have been left unmonitored while riots erupted, resulting in injuries or deaths that were never fully investigated. Even in instances where internal investigations occurred, records often disappear, witnesses are intimidated, and accountability becomes a myth. Angola's internal machinery seems designed to protect those in power, whether they wear a badge or a uniform. One particularly harrowing account involves an inmate known as Little Ray, a man who had been inside Angola for over 15 years. Ray was approached by a guard who offered protection in exchange for turning a blind eye to a weapons exchange orchestrated by a gang lieutenant. Refusal meant facing daily beatings and threats, not just from the gang but indirectly sanctioned by the guard. Compliance meant becoming complicit in a system built on fear and violence. Ray's story illustrates the impossible choices inmates face daily, a cycle of corruption that consumes everyone who steps inside. Even more shocking are the tales of murders and assaults that appear almost ritualistic in their execution. Inmates describe killings where weapons were smuggled in by staff, where emergency response was deliberately delayed, and where the aftermath was covered up with bureaucratic efficiency. These aren't isolated incidents. They are symptomatic of a system that allows, if not encourages, selective enforcement and the exploitation of human life for control. The financial incentive for guards is undeniable. Contraband trades hands at staggering prices inside Angola. A single cell phone can fetch thousands of dollars once it reaches the right inmate. Drugs move through invisible channels, often facilitated by staff, enriching both inmate and officer. Cigarettes and commissary items become currency, and the informal economy thrives under a veil of authority that rarely intervenes. Every deal, every transaction, carries the risk of violence, yet the potential payoff often outweighs fear. And yet, not all officers are corrupt. Some are trapped in a system that tests morality daily, forced to navigate a minefield where any act of integrity can mark them as targets for retaliation, either from inmates or peers who view compliance as weakness. Those few who attempt to expose wrongdoing face intimidation, reassignment, or career-ending scrutiny. Angola, in essence, protects its predators by making it nearly impossible for whistleblowers to survive. The human cost of this corruption is staggering. Inmates suffer physical and psychological trauma, often compounded by the knowledge that the system is rigged against them. Families on the outside are manipulated, sometimes threatened, and frequently powerless to intervene. And the broader public remains largely unaware, shielded by bureaucratic opacity, media disinterest, and the prison's remote location. Angola operates as a closed ecosystem where abuse thrives under layers of authority and secrecy. Among the darkest tales are those that intersect greed, power, and fatal ambition. One infamous case involved a guard who colluded with an inmate gang to smuggle drugs into the prison, financing a personal lifestyle while simultaneously instigating violence to maintain control over rival groups. Investigators later found that several assaults and at least one death were directly connected to this corruption ring. Despite overwhelming evidence, the officer received a surprisingly lenient sentence, further fueling the perception that Angola's justice system often protects insiders rather than punishes wrongdoing. The interplay between inmate power and officer complicity transforms Angola into a world where trust is scarce, alliances are precarious, and survival requires a constant calculus of risk and reward. The prison, in many ways, functions as a lawless microcosm of society, where the powerful exploit both those above and below them, and where corruption is not an aberration but the norm. Yet even in this darkness, stories of resilience emerge. Inmates find ingenious ways to navigate a corrupt system, forging alliances, leveraging knowledge, and sometimes manipulating the manipulators themselves. These acts of cunning, while small victories in a brutal environment, reveal the indomitable will of those trapped within Angola's iron grip. As night falls over the sprawling compound, Angola reveals its true face, a place where corruption thrives, violence is currency, and survival is the ultimate crime and punishment. Within these walls, morality is fluid, power is absolute, and the shadow of danger is omnipresent. The prison's secrets are deep, its hierarchy ruthless, and its stories harrowing. But for those who dare to look, Angola offers a lens into humanity's darkest capacities. The walls of Angola are more than stone and steel. they are silent witnesses to decades of rebellion, violence, and unrest. While corruption festers quietly in the shadows, it occasionally erupts into chaos. Angola's history is punctuated by riots and uprisings, each leaving scars on the institution and revealing the extreme pressures that fester behind bars. These incidents expose the volatile mix of power struggles, systemic neglect, and unchecked aggression that defines life in America's most notorious prison. One of the most notorious riots erupted in the mid-1990s, sparked by tensions between rival gangs, compounded by frustrations with guard brutality and administrative negligence. The spark was minor, a fight over food distribution, but it quickly escalated into a full-scale uprising. 4 hours, inmates clashed with each other and with officers, wielding improvised weapons and exploiting weaknesses in security protocols. Guards, many complicit in corruption, struggled to regain control, and the chaos left multiple inmates critically injured. The administration eventually restored order, but only after the riot had exposed the fragile equilibrium maintained through fear and coercion. Riots at Angola are rarely spontaneous, they are calculated statements of power and resistance. Inmates meticulously plan, leveraging intelligence networks and alliances that stretch across cell blocks. They know the blind spots in surveillance, the routines of guards, and the vulnerabilities of rival factions. The prison becomes a chessboard, with violence as both weapon and message. Those who instigate uprisings are often high-ranking inmates seeking to consolidate power or retaliate against perceived slights, whether from other prisoners or from staff. The consequences of rebellion are brutal. Rioters face extended sentences, solitary confinement, and sometimes death. Yet even the administration's harshest punishments often fail to dismantle the underlying networks of corruption and influence. Instead, power shifts, allegiances are reforged, and the cycle begins anew. Angola's environment rewards cunning, ruthlessness, and the ability to survive, and punishes the naive or morally rigid. Amid the chaos, contraband continues to flow. During riots, guards are often distracted, creating temporary opportunities for illicit trades. Inmates exploit these moments, smuggling phones, drugs, and other items into areas previously thought secure. Some guard complicity in these operations has been documented. Officers occasionally use riots as cover to benefit financially or consolidate influence within the prison's internal hierarchy. For inmates, a riot is both a weapon and a bargaining chip, a way to gain leverage over those who hold official authority. Not all conflicts are gang-related or power-driven. Some emerge from personal vendettas, jealousy, or perceived injustices. These smaller-scale disputes can erupt into deadly confrontations, often with tragic consequences. One documented case involved an inmate who retaliated against a fellow prisoner over a stolen commissary package, leading to a violent brawl that left 2 dead and several injured. The administration's response was limited and selective, fueling the perception that certain lives were expendable, and reinforcing the message that survival requires constant vigilance. Even during moments of extreme violence, ingenuity emerges. Inmates develop complex signaling systems, coded communications, and alliances to anticipate attacks or influence outcomes. These networks function as both defensive mechanisms and instruments of power. Knowledge becomes currency, knowing who to trust, which alliances are stable, and which officers can be influenced or bribed is as critical as physical survival. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of Angola's riots is their unpredictability. Even seasoned observers cannot always foresee which spark will ignite a storm. Tensions simmer beneath the surface, invisible to outsiders, while the prison maintains a facade of control. But inside, every interaction, every slight, every ignored grievance can escalate into life-threatening chaos. Inmates learn to read microsignals, body language, whispered threats, subtle shifts in behavior, because the cost of misreading them can be fatal. Amid the chaos of riots, stories emerge of courage and cunning. Inmates sometimes act to protect vulnerable prisoners, diffusing volatile situations or leveraging their influence to prevent bloodshed. These rare acts of humanity highlight the paradoxical nature of Angola, a place where brutality and compassion, cruelty and ingenuity, coexist in constant tension. Investigations into Angola's riots often reveal systemic failures. Reports indicate that understaffing, poor training, and administrative corruption exacerbate conflicts, creating conditions ripe for rebellion. Media coverage is sporadic, and the true scale of violence remains hidden from public view. The prison's remote location and insular culture allow incidents to unfold with minimal accountability, creating a cycle where unrest is almost inevitable. Through all this, Angola's inmates continue to navigate a world defined by uncertainty, fear, and opportunism. They learn to survive in a system designed to test them, where every action carries consequences, and every alliance must be weighed for loyalty and risk. The riots, rebellions, and hidden wars inside these walls are not anomalies, they are reflections of the extreme environment that shapes every aspect of life in Angola. As dusk falls over the prison yard, the echoes of past violence linger. Angola remains a crucible of human behavior, a place where corruption, power, and survival intersect in ways the outside world can scarcely comprehend. Behind these walls, life is a constant negotiation, a brutal, dangerous game in which every prisoner, every guard, and every whispered secret contributes to a fragile and volatile ecosystem. Angola State Prison has been home to some of America's most dangerous and notorious inmates. Men who, outside these walls, made headlines for murder, organized crime, or acts so heinous they defy comprehension. Inside Angola, however, notoriety is redefined, not just by past crimes, but by how a prisoner navigates the deadly ecosystem of corruption, power, and survival. Among them, some inmates became legends, infamous for their cunning, brutality, or ability to manipulate both guards and peers. One such inmate, known in the prison only as Hurricane, rose through the ranks with calculated precision. Hurricane wasn't the strongest or the most violent, but he had an uncanny ability to understand Angola's social structure. He brokered alliances, managed contraband networks, and subtly coerced compliant guards into turning a blind eye. His reputation became a shield. Few dared to challenge him, knowing the consequences could be lethal. Hurricanes like him illustrate a chilling truth. In Angola, survival is not about morality, it's about influence. Then there is the notorious Angola Experiment, a series of controversial studies conducted by outside researchers and sanctioned by prison authorities in the late 20th century. Ostensibly, these experiments sought to understand inmate behavior, rehabilitation potential, and responses to solitary confinement. In reality, they often pushed the boundaries of ethics. Inmates were subjected to extended periods of isolation, psychological manipulation, and stress tests that many argue amounted to cruel and unusual punishment. Documents later revealed that some guards, complicit in the design or execution of these experiments, treated participants inhumanely, seeing them as expendable subjects rather than human beings. The results left lasting scars on those involved and highlighted systemic disregard for inmate welfare. Violence, of course, was a constant. Murders inside Angola were often meticulously planned, executed with shocking precision, and sometimes abetted by staff complicity. One inmate, Big Red, orchestrated a killing that shocked the prison community. Targeting a rival lieutenant who had betrayed him, Big Red manipulated guards, leveraged alliances across multiple gangs, and executed the plan in a way that left investigators baffled. The murder was both a statement of dominance and a cautionary tale. Even inside a prison, power is not absolute unless enforced ruthlessly. Other infamous cases reveal the interplay between corruption and survival. In one documented incident, an inmate used a smuggled cell phone to coordinate the intimidation of a guard who had threatened his privileges. The guard, fearing retaliation or exposure, ignored violations that would normally have led to disciplinary action. The incident exemplifies the twisted symbiosis of Angola. Inmates manipulate staff manipulate systems, and morality becomes a fluid concept. Survival depends on understanding these dynamics better than anyone else. Angola's legacy also includes high-profile escapes and near-escapes, though few are widely publicized. Each attempt, whether successful or foiled, underscores the ingenuity of inmates, the flaws in security protocols, and the complicity, or negligence, of certain officers. Escape plans were often multi-layered, involving allies inside and outside the prison, exploiting blind spots in guard routines, and capitalizing on moments of chaos such as riots or lockdowns. While most attempts ended in failure, they reveal a constant truth: Angola's walls are physical barriers, but the real control lies in social and psychological mastery. The human cost of these infamous inmates' actions is staggering. Lives are lost, families traumatized, and the prison community forced into a perpetual state of tension. But these stories are also a study in resilience and adaptation. Some inmates, though notorious, develop codes of conduct, enforce their own rules, and create micro-societies within the prison that, for better or worse, maintain order amidst chaos. Others spiral into violence, consumed by ambition, fear, or retaliation, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of Angola is that every inmate, whether infamous or obscure, exists in a system where corruption, violence, and survival intersect. The kings and lieutenants, the manipulative guards, and the everyday prisoners all contribute to a complex ecosystem. Choices carry profound consequences. One misstep can lead to solitary confinement, assault, or death. Yet even amid horror, small acts of humanity persist. An inmate shielding a vulnerable peer, a guard discreetly preventing violence, or a whispered lesson in survival passed from one prisoner to another. These stories, the Angola Experiment, and the high-profile murders collectively paint a portrait of a prison unlike any other. Angola is not merely a facility for incarceration, it is a crucible where the extremes of human behavior are magnified, tested, and exploited. The infamous inmates are both architects and victims of this environment, each navigating a system designed to break them, yet in many cases, inadvertently creating power structures that rival the outside world in complexity and ruthlessness. As dawn rises over the sprawling fields of Angola, the legacy of these notorious inmates is visible everywhere, in the whispered warnings of cell blocks, the silent authority of kings and lieutenants, and in the subtle, ever-present fear that binds this community together. Survival here is a constant negotiation, a balance between power, cunning, and moral compromise. And for those inside, life is never straightforward, every day is a test, every relationship a potential threat, and every shadow could conceal both danger and opportunity. Angola State Prison is more than a facility, it is a world unto itself. A place where corruption flows as freely as fear, where violence is both tool and currency, and where survival demands cunning, resilience, and constant vigilance. Over decades, the prison has shaped men, broken men, and, in many ways, mirrored the darkest capacities of society itself. The stories of the kings, the lieutenants, the notorious inmates, and the complicity of guards reveal a complex ecosystem, one built on power, manipulation, and the human will to survive. Riots, murders, smuggling networks, and controversial experiments are not just headlines, they are the fabric of Angola, woven with sweat, blood, and secrecy. Yet even in this darkness, moments of humanity shine through. Mentorship between inmates, acts of courage, and small efforts to uphold decency demonstrate that even in the most brutal environments, people strive to endure and, sometimes, to do right. Angola is a place of contrasts, a crucible where cruelty and compassion collide, and where every decision can be a matter of life or death. For those on the outside, Angola remains largely a mystery. Its stories are hidden, its horrors often unreported, and its culture of corruption persistent. But through documentaries like this, we glimpse a world that challenges our understanding of justice, morality, and the human capacity for both evil and resilience. The gates may close behind us, but the echoes of Angola linger, reminding us of the complexities of power, survival, and humanity in one of the most notorious prisons in the United States. If you found this journey into Angola eye-opening, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more deep dives into the world's most notorious prisons. Leave a comment below telling us which story shocked you the most, and share this video to spread awareness about life behind the walls of America's most infamous institutions.